Okay, it's we're back. It's the Future Proof Podcast team back on September 13th around 2:00, and we're joined with our colleague Elizabeth Stone. She has not joined us before, so we're stoked to have her join us. And I would love to hear you introduce yourself, give us a little background. I will tell you, she's been hard working with us for it feels like a year, but probably not exactly a year.
I think it's coming up. Like November is almost a year.
Coming up, like
Somehow.
we started
Yeah.
before she was joining us like as an investor even before we started, but she's been doing so much cool stuff, but also just talking to like literally Elizabeth talks to more people in a week than I do in like 6 months. So like I'm gonna hand it over to you, Elizabeth. Like give your a little introduction of yourself, your entrepreneurial background, your investing background, and we'll just jump in. We're gonna talk about sales process and AI, how that's all happening. But let's start there with Elizabeth. Welcome.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. So my background is a little bit of everything, but I've been in the entrepreneur space for, I don't know, the last 15 years doing sales and marketing and business strategy. I started out mostly in the medical device space, but I've expanded to e-commerce and real estate and helping, big and small businesses kind of bring their technology and innovations to life. And I've been, utilizing a lot of these AI tools that are out there, especially in the sales and marketing, for a lot of these companies.
That's great. And after working with Elizabeth for a while, there's just like intense curiosity, and it's just absolutely great when we end up doing a 15-minute call. We end up being on for an hour just dreaming about different things to do. And so we just think that this podcast is just going to drift around. The theme is going to be around sales and AI and how it's affecting sales teams or sales processes. And, we're just going to jump in. I think like, let's just start, Shane. I think that, we've been tracking interesting sales related AI companies or native AI sales companies. And I know that we've been using Seamless and, which I think is called Seamless AI, right? And
Yes.
We've been using that a lot. I know Elizabeth brought that in. I don't know if they became an official partner program yet, but I think we're out to them. But we like this piece of software. Like between either one of you guys, like what do you guys think about it? Like where do you think that kind of company's going? Let's just jump in. Shane or Elizabeth, jump in.
I would say the reason, and then I'll let you jump in, Liz, but welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. We track an enormous number of companies like we've talked about on prior episodes. And, one of the ways in which we really want to differentiate ourselves, because there are a lot of directories in the market, but we think that means something, right? We think it means that people are in need of clarity and need a lot of help discovering the right AI tools. And when you're tracking as many as we are, which now it's past 50,000 different AI solutions in our database, it becomes very difficult to be able to cut through the noise, identify who you want to talk to, but then scale up your outreach. And if you're a small team, AI can really be instrumental in doing these things. So we, led by Liz, embarked on a journey to identify a solution that would help us automate some of our outreach and the ways in which we're managing our CRM. And Seamless was one of the companies that we landed on after having looked at a lot of different solutions. And one of the reasons why we wanted to use Seamless was to enrich our data, right? How can we identify the right people at the right companies? And there's a lot of data jujitsu that's involved in enriching your own data first before you can really use something like Seamless effectively. But Seamless has been really helpful in that respect, enriching data, finding leads. They're introducing new features, it seems like, constantly. A lot of platforms are moving to a point where not only can you do the data enrichment, but you can also actually automate the outreach. And there are several companies that we've come across, for example, where they'll find the person that you want to reach, but then they'll also do things like scan their LinkedIn profiles, for example, and then use that data along with data that they prompt you to provide on your own company or your own initiative to then craft a personalized outreach email that you can send across multiple different channels, whether it's email or LinkedIn or social platform. Seamless doesn't do all of that for us, but it has been really good, for the data enrichment piece. I mean, Liz,
I do like that
what
they're
would you
adding
add?
a lot of features too. So I guess one thing I like about Seamless is they pull from multiple different sources. So when using some of the other tools, they seem to just default to LinkedIn and only pull from LinkedIn. I liked that Seamless pulls from like a lot of different sources and then combines the records to give you a better data set, is what I found. But they are adding a lot of features pretty fast. So, they have the CRM integrations that they can do. So you can automatically send out emails or import the leads into them. They also added a feature that if you have a list of businesses, you can like import it as a CSV and then pull from that list of businesses. So I think that they're doing a good job listening to their audience and adding the features as they come in. So there's, the automation, the lead pulling, and some of the marketing that's in there now too.
What would you say about their, because none of that stuff really, needs to employ any use of generative AI. But what would you say about their features when it does come to generative AI, Liz? I mean, have you had a chance to explore
I
those
mean,
much?
with their
Do they have
marketing stuff
features
that
that you
they
like?
can. Yeah, I mean, with some of their sales and marketing, so when you pull the leads, it will customize like an email already from you from the data that they're pulling. So they're
Mm,
using some marketing and sales tactics right within Seamless now. Like you can send the emails right in there, and it will generate the emails kind of for you based on the records that they're pulling. So, I mean,
mhm.
other tools can do this. Like before, I was just exporting the data from them and then importing it to, Monday or something else. But they are adding these so you can do it right within there. So you don't have to, copy and paste the information into Chat GPT and write your own email. You can do it right within Seamless. It also will offer like different suggestions. So like different people to reach out in their kind of marketing tools. Um, the, you know, I think I think they're going to continue to keep adding some of these features. Like I'm seeing that as a trend with a lot of the larger companies. As these smaller like startup companies are adding features, it's creating competition for them. So they're starting to incorporate them right within their tools. So I think
Yeah.
it's just going to get better. I mean, I'm seeing this in Shopify and other places too.
Well, that the ability to go that next step, which is the outreach, automated outreach, was really my biggest complaint with Seamless in the beginning
Same. I
because
mean,
they just
they're not really doing
didn't
it
do
with
it.
LinkedIn yet. So I'm hoping they do it with
Yeah.
LinkedIn next. Like this just kind of is an automated integration with like a CRM. It does integrate with Gmail too. So you can just send them directly through Gmail, like write the emails and send them directly through Gmail. But
Mhm.
I think I'd be curious if they try to integrate directly with like social media or LinkedIn outreach next.
Yeah. Well, who would you say is a good example of a company that does do this? I know I've looked at, other companies like Calendar AI.
I like Wallaxi.
We've looked at Wallaxi. I mean,
Yeah, I do like
why don't you talk
Wallaxi.
about Wallaxi a little bit and how it's differentiated in this regard?
I liked Wallaxi for its integration with LinkedIn. I think it did a really good job at conversion rates for LinkedIn. So it has a strategy where you can pull it's kind of like right within LinkedIn, so you can pull different lists right within LinkedIn and import them into Wallaxi. But what it will do is it will request that person to connect with you first, and so I think your answer rate on when you actually send a message is a lot higher because it's sending them request to connect, and then it automates, kind of a sequence from there, and you can, decide if it's all automated or like you can jump in manually. But I've had some pretty good success with. I like
Hmm.
Wallaxi. I think
How do
Wallaxi
you
is good for
find
my
the
LinkedIn outreach.
How do you find the quality of the messages? Because a discerning listener would, may immediately think, well, the last thing we need is even more spam. One of my problems using LinkedIn nowadays is every time I go there, I've got at least 100 new messages from people who are trying to sell me everything from, SEO to web development services. And it's resulted in me not wanting to check the messages at all,
Yeah.
because there's just so much noise that I have to sift through. Right. So do you think it helps or hurts
I
being able to
think
automate like this, especially when it comes to the message quality?
I think you have to come in with the right prompts and the right knowledge to create the best messages. So, for example, I find on LinkedIn, to your point, they have to be the shortest messages possible. And so, if you don't know that ahead of time and you just let a Wallaxi or another automated create these messages, I find they tend to create really long messages that nobody wants to read. So, I
Yeah.
think having the knowledge and experience of like doing it manually for any of the AI tools helps.
Mhm.
Like I did it so much manually on LinkedIn and then figured out, okay, when you do like one lines to people or one question, your response rate is a lot higher. So now when you go into Wallaxi to build out a campaign, right, you want to prompt it and make sure um, to take that into consideration or give it examples of, campaigns that have worked. Otherwise, I think it generates way too long of messages that I don't want to read. Like when I see them on LinkedIn, I'm like, I'm ignoring you. If it's more than a sentence, I'm not even going to read it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that a lot of the AI, like when they're helping you write something, it's not, they don't do brevity very well. You have to kind of you have to sort of massage them into being shorter. But I think that's what, like, that's the, that's the good news for the sales rep or the BDR. It's like they can actually get something written, thought starter, tune it for the medium. It's not fully autopilot, but no, yeah,
I
it's
mean, that's where you import your expertise. Like, I
yeah,
think that's actually what you should be using the AI for. Like, you should be using it as a tool, right? So you're importing all your expertise and your knowledge from whether it be sales or marketing or using Shopify or building websites. If you don't feed it that information, it's not going to give you as good of results.
yeah,
No matter what tool you're using. If you're not just using it as a tool and trying to just set it as automated, it's not going to know, your 10, 15, 20 years of experience in that
Yeah. And
particular
that's where I think
space.
the good tools, it's really table stakes for me. It's like, is it allowing you to provide information that becomes
Yeah.
context for these automated emails? Because if without that context, then it's going to just default to whatever it was trained on and a bunch of generic data. And therefore you lose a lot of the personalization.
I mean, this is where like make.com and some of the other ones really come in. Like that's where I found that to be helpful because you take a tool like Wallaxi and put it through, a GPT that you've created or Perplexity, and you can really customize the response down more or import data how you want it
Hmm.
to be. So I think that's actually where like a make.com or something like that comes in handy because
Well,
otherwise if
go into a little more. A lot of people may have never used Make before. Maybe break that down in a little bit more detail so people understand exactly what you mean by that.
so make.com is kind of like Zapier. Like you can string together different applications and flows and workflows, for anything, whether it be, newsletters, we use it a lot for co-AI or social media posts, or I like it a lot for lead gen forms. So if you have like your typical lead gen form on your website, you can start with that and put it through this flow. So you can build out these custom flows where you're putting it through GPTs to make it, I don't know if more human's the right word, but you can kind of customize them. So if you're starting from a form, you can then prompt it to, whether it be, okay, so I guess I'll give an example that might help.
yeah,
So
like
if there's like a therapist office, okay, and they're getting a lead gen form on their page, right? And say they don't take a couples therapy, right? So right now what's happening is they get a lead on their page and they're just calling every single lead no matter what. That person fills out the information, they want therapy, and they're calling the lead. And so they might waste 45 minutes talking to someone that needs couples therapy, but they don't even do couples therapy. and it's taking up a lot of their time. So you can create a flow now that's going from the jot form or paper form or whatever form it is on the website, and it's collecting information and saying, like, if this person needs couples therapy, we're going to trigger them out of me calling them and send them instead like a referral based link. So it can really like analyze the data and like send it into different flows on Make. So I find that sometimes these one individual tools don't do everything, but if you build them together in different flows, that's where it becomes useful. And then also if you take the knowledge out of your head in between these different steps. So like that therapist knows all of the things that she would reject. So if you can extract out of her head, like, okay, give me the criteria of all of the people that you don't want to take on and give me the criteria of all the people that you do, then you can build out GPTs like in between these tools for each of those criterias.
Okay, so the first tool, so Make, essentially, for people who have never heard of Make or Zapier for that matter, will allow you to string together different applications, right? So if you use one application like your form, builder is on
like
your
a
website,
jot form or paper form or whatever.
but you need to send that information to another application. Maybe it's something to do with referrals, like you said. And between,
or an email based or a text message or
and between those steps, maybe you want to do some sort of analysis with ChatGPT. Make will allow you to string those different steps together into one automatic workflow, right?
I think the key thing to point out is the fact that these automations existed before. So with Zapier, you could string together like a form to go automatically to an email. It's the fact that you can this entire new level of customization in between. So in between it just going from the form to a generic like automated email or a generic automated like abandoned cart, right? You can pull information and really customize all of those responses. Like that's where the AI comes in. Like you're able to not just automate the flow, you're able to like individually customize the automation of the flow.
Yeah, and that's why I think these, there's so much talk about AI agents now. And I think for a lot of people, it's kind of the holy grail of AI, because now instead of having to sit in front of your computer, really actively engaged in a conversation with ChatGPT or Anthropic, because you have to respond to every response that comes back, pretty much immediately. And the promise of an agent is that it can then take a workflow, not just a task, and go off and complete it autonomously. And that's why I think, these workflow builders like Make or Zapier, are the closest thing in some ways that we have to agents.
Yeah,
right?
I think
why we see companies like Salesforce coming out, with this new product, Agentforce, which I believe they announced yesterday.
Yeah, they did.
But Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys are doing great without me. I was going to go get a cup of coffee and come back for the ending podcast. No, but I think it's great. I think what Elizabeth said was like, Zapier was already connecting these disparate sort of SaaS products that we all have. And that was sort of like, maybe like a 4-year ago kind of concept. Right. And Zapier and Make have taken up the challenge of like adding AI in between those steps, which is like, we move from like what I always just call like deterministic. It's like, okay, if this happens, go here, update my Airtable, or if this happens, send an email. But now we can intercept it, like you were saying, where it's like, you could now say, read the email, take the following actions, like look them up on LinkedIn, craft an email back to them, send me an email that I could send so it's in my drafts. Like you could do a bunch of things that you could never do before, because the LLM, the AI can actually not necessarily think, but it can follow the instructions, but it can generate. This is the power of it. It generates a message. It can do 2 things for you or 3 things for you, and then make you an email. And that's going to be, I think, in the sales team world, like that's going to like basically fill up. It's going to give you back time because it's going to solve those problems for you. You still have to babysit them. We the 3 of us, we use Make all the time. We're using that. I think and there's also like Pipedrive, Gumloop, like you said, Zapier, and like, of course, Salesforce, I think is the biggest in the room, right? And they have, what do they call it? Agent Force. None of us have
Agent
tried
Force,
it.
Agent Force, yeah.
But it's a great name, right? Because it's like they're going to say, they're forced to like actually change the way they operate. And if Salesforce changes, it means that, like, I would say the entire sales apparatus on planet Earth will change, right? It's like, because Salesforce has so many people in their CRMs and there's so many sales motions already established in there, that if they start building out basic agents, it means that developers, Elizabeth, your team, you could start building, like, Agent Force agents that'll probably like help run Salesforce products, and it will change the game. And that means that, like, you in a sales organization, or you're running a sales organization, you have to change. Like, it's inevitable. Like, and that's where we are loving all this kind of new software, and we actually think that it's going to give obviously the really large companies a way to change, but let's be honest, there's millions of like solopreneur side hustle people that are all using Shopify and whether it's Monday or Salesforce. It's giving them a whole new way to operate as a larger company. I'll just throw it out there, like, Shane, I know we've talked about like the solopreneur billion-dollar company, but like, this changes the game, right? This really helps us.
Yeah, I think once, for people who really understand how to use these tools, I think it definitely does, right? Because now you don't need, this is just a lot of people, you don't need to be doing this for you if you can put it more or less on autopilot, and with the and then one of the reasons why I think that you're seeing a lot of traction with things like, workflow automation and agents in sales is because, for one, every company needs to sell, right? Like, regardless of what kind of company you are, you need to attract customers. And it's hard, the market's very competitive. So you have to reach out to a lot of people. It's a numbers game. And that's where automation, is really helpful. It's like scaling up things that usually can take quite a long time to do. And it's kind of formulaic the way you do it. You're managing a lot of data in a CRM. You want to reach out to a lot of those folks. You want to be able to record their feedback. You want to be able to record conversations. A lot of, new sales AI tools will actually record your phone calls and your Zoom calls and
give notes,
provide coaching feedback to you, to see if, you're pitching and presenting your product in a way that, your company or you yourself want to. It's recommending, actionable insights for you to improve the way you're talking to people. It's all being done with AI. And where I see Salesforce going with this Agent Force product is they're kind of, they understand that you have this entire life cycle, in the sales process. Not just sales, though. I mean, they're marketing it to really any business team, for any, internally or for customers. But I think they want to kind of obviate the need for you to have to build these workflows yourself with something like, Make or Zapier. Because
because
using
it's still
something like Make is
tedious.
actually
It's still
not easy.
hard.
Yeah,
No, it's not easy.
using Make is not easy at all, especially if you don't have a technical background. There's a big learning curve.
For sure.
For a lot of these. The other thing I actually really like too is, from a sales perspective, some of these unqualified leads are really helpful to make business decision for like other products, or even just do referral links, right? Like, I think we were talking about earlier, if you're, I don't know, a landscaping company, right? And you only do residential, but you're getting a bunch of leads for commercial. I mean, it can automatically send them a referral link to a commercial, landscaper now. So some of these leads that you were just, wasting time on and then losing, you can kind of use for either referrals, or maybe like help with your business direction. Like, maybe I should offer this product, or maybe offer this service because I'm getting a lot of leads, for this particular thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's again, since the lead now can be read by, whether you're using OpenAI's product or Google's product or Anthropic's product, it could read it and make that decision. And then there you can route. Whereas before, you'd have to have like a developer write like a very strict thing where it's like, do this, then do this, and that's it. And then, you don't want to call that guy back up, but now you can kind of almost do it yourself. So I think my whole thing around sales is like, I think you were saying it's a numbers game, Shane. In a lot of cases, it's a numbers game. Other cases, it's like a relationship. It's like a relationship business, right? And so like, it's like, as you have your CRMs filled with all this data and this awareness of your customer, and as you enrich that data, you could write proactive messaging where you're not necessarily selling the customer, but you're updating the customer with something that you know that might be interesting. So like if you're working at a higher level and you know that like your customer is working within like the, agricultural business or the food prep business, like a relatively interesting article that might be germane to them, you could actually write a system where it's like, hey, was thinking about you. There's a really cool article on food prep, and it's a simple way that you don't have to do it, but the system could do it, right? And it doesn't have to do it like once a day. It could do it like once a month. And you could set up those automations where you could find out like, hey, they opened that message. That's cool. I'll send it next month, another article. But like you could create those listeners that are domain specific to your customers based on your CRM. And you don't have to do it. Like you could do your birthday messages. You could do all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's like, it may become perfunctory for the customer to read these, but I think that as you get really good at using the Gen AI tools, they might not be perfunctory. They actually might be really quite interesting and stellar. And I think we're going to get to the world where that's going to happen. Now, this will be funny. It's like, I think you'll also get to the world where when my email is written by an AI from my sales team, my customer's probably going to read it with an AI and might literally respond with an AI. So I think we're going to get to this place where we're reliant on systems that are generating, but we actually might not be listening. And I think that that's going to be like I don't know when that's going to happen, but if you recall when everyone started getting email, it's like, okay, I sent you an email. And then it was just like, at some point, like email was just like not reliable anymore because you're just getting so many emails. I think we've sort of matured because we became so like email literate. But that was a big deal, a decade ago. I think we're going to be in the same curve of like AI literacy and sort of like how to deal with it as a user, as a recipient of AI. Like, have you guys given any thought of that or in that as you guys have been working?
I mean, I'd be interested to see kind of what's next then, because you're right. Like, if I'm not reading my emails and I know the emails I'm being sent are not being read by me.
I mean, I think a lot of people, email is kind of the bane of their existence.
Everybody's existence,
you get so much, and it's not because you don't like hearing from everybody. It's just you're bombarded with too much, and that's why I started off the conversation asking you that question, Liz, about, is this a good thing? The automated outreach. Because if we're already getting bombarded, do we want, 10, 100, 1,000 times more messaging, right? And I guess the way that I think about it is very much related to what you were saying a minute ago, Anthony, where, at some point, maybe we reach this inflection point and it goes from being not just perfunctory, but really annoying and impersonal and unhelpful to actually being exactly what we need right when we need it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think about, ads in the same way, right? Like a lot of people, ads tend to get a really bad rap because you're bombarded with something you didn't ask for. A lot of times you don't want it. Mm-hmm. So it's invasive, and it's distracting and annoying, but a really well-targeted ad is actually really
exactly helpful. When you need it. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I didn't even know that this existed, but it's exactly my taste.
Yeah.
And it's exactly when I needed it.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, all this stuff with agents and sales and outreach, automated outreach included, I think the goal should be to get to a point just like that, where you're being reached out to by a company at the right time and the right place with the right message. And I think with enough data, that's really powerful and actually and it could be delightful too.
What you're talking about, ad and sale, outbound sales, even if it's automated through an AI system, I think the AI system can become. I think that's where a little more sophisticated companies will actually be able to improve their AI tooling so that they could deliver that, like, the just in time, messaging and on topic, because they could be very aware of like where you are at as a buyer in your buyer motion, and where and it could adjust its sales motion to meet you there. I think that's going to be very powerful, and I think therefore the message that you get or will actually be
helpful.
I have two things that kind of drive this conversation. One might go off the radar, but the ads for me are really on topic, and to me are considered content. Is if I'm really passionate about something, like if I'm like I've been really passionate about pickleball. So if I see a pickleball ad for a great new racket, I'm not going, you're interrupting my research here. It's like that's where it's like, no, you're actually informing me about your new product, right? And I think that's like when the buyer's in that mode of like, no, I'm actually really searching, that ad is very important. And if it's not an ad, that message is really important. And I feel like it's like you as a buyer want to like almost be able to trigger AIs. And this will lead me to the next place. Is like, no, I'm in a research mode. So like if you want to message me, here's how to message me with, and I'm interested in, like, I don't know, modifying my warehouse with new systems. Like I set myself into that mode, which then triggers AIs that could be like, whether they're hooked up to LinkedIn or hooked up to
it's going to be Google.
Like it notifies them that like I'm open for like modifying my warehouse, and that I want a feed of the best offers and things that I could think about, because I'm researching that right now. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, and that's where I think it's like, if you think about AI systems that are basically open on the internet through APIs, I feel like there'll be a time where you could notify the world that I'm interested in this, and then the world, meaning AI world, they could respond through a trigger that will say, okay, here, and you're getting something that looks like a feed of information, but it might be a feed of ads, but it's like, it's informative to you now in that moment. I wonder if that, like, were you guys...
I mean, that's kind of where Google's gone. I mean, the Google ads are pretty good, right? I mean, to even the point of you're talking about something and now all of a sudden you see all the ads about it. But I mean, they're the ones that are going to do something like this, right? Companies are going to have to pay to be on, Google's ad feed, but it's going to be very targeted.
Well, it is
when
right?
people are searching.
I mean,
Google's doing that.
That's why. So that brings me back to the Seamless conversation, and we do find them very useful. But from a strictly generative AI perspective, when we first started looking at them, and we've been using them since, so obviously they're very useful. Again, my biggest complaint was, well, I need help with the next step of the journey, right? Like, you're helping me enrich the data, and you're enriching that data from sources that have a lot of other data that would be really helpful context to then form a really thoughtful message. And you're not doing that yet, right? Like, you're not following me on the journey. And I think they've started to address that. We've talked to their team, and we know that features like that are rolling out. But that's where something, Google and Salesforce, for that matter, they know that. They know exactly that, right? And they want to stay with you every step of the way on the journey, right? Because they know that the people out there, the early adopters especially, they're having to rely on the Makes and the Zapiers of the world, and that's just a pain.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons why. It's one of the reasons why I think I would bet the vast majority of people who, do any sort of meaningful outreach are still doing it in an Excel document or a Google Sheet, which is just
probably are. Well, the other thing you can do with that data though is so if you export the data from Seamless, you can import that data into Facebook and do retargeting based off of it too. So you can take that data and do other stuff with it. But you're right, it's not following people along a journey the same way that Facebook and Google is.
I have another, like, it might be a switch here, but there's millions of entrepreneurs that are selling through Shopify and selling through Amazon. I know Shane and Elizabeth, you both have sort of domain expertise here. How do you think like the AI automation is going to help in sort of the classic e-commerce sense? Meaning, like, people are browsing your material inside a Shopify or an Amazon universe. Like, where do you see AI like changing that game? And do you think Amazon and Shopify have moved in the right directions in 2024?
every aspect of the
100%.
entire experience is being rethought with AI.
Yeah.
Literally every step, right? So you've got, images, for example. Every person that sells on Shopify, you need images of your product. And product photography is not exactly cheap, right? Like you can do it yourself, right? But it's still tough when you throw in things like, the need for models or to rent out, locations to do product
Space,
shots.
yeah.
That's also not cheap. But there's a whole sub industry of tools being developed that are creating essentially, synthetic backgrounds that you can use for your products, 3D renderings of your products. So there's images. There's also just basic customer service and chatbots, right? Being able to have a conversation with a bot that's not so deterministic, where it's like, if you need help with this, press 1. Like that's the most frustrating experience on earth. But now a lot of these chatbots are being trained on your data, right? So they're able
In
to
your
answer
shop.
very
Yeah.
specific, targeted questions, right? There's a variety of marketing and sales tools that plug directly into Shopify. So like you can go literally on and on. Think about any need that you have
Abandoned cart,
selling in
everything.
e-commerce, and
Yeah.
it's being reimagined
Yeah.
with AI.
So
Shopify is integrating a lot of these features themselves too, is what I've
Yeah.
noticed. Like you don't even have to add on a bunch of different apps. So they're doing it right within. Like you can go start typing in your product description and there's like a chat right in there that will make the rest of your product description for you.
Mhm.
Or the abandoned cart. And even with the abandoned cart, right? So I think before, I don't know, the abandoned cart recovery is maybe like 5% because it's just sending a generic email to everybody about like you forgot something in your cart, right? So it's only capturing those people that actually the reason they didn't check out was because they forgot. But now you can kind of customize that entire journey too. So it's like
Yeah.
emailing them like,
yeah.
oh, was the shipping the problem? Or like you can do research on the person or individual that's like checking out. So
And
a
there's a
lot of these
number of
features
tools.
are,
There are a
yeah,
number of tools on that note that do things like essentially website visitor identification, where maybe you're just browsing the
yeah.
site and they are tracking you while you're there and putting together a profile. So you can essentially put together user personas for people who didn't even convert on your website. There are other tools that offer the ability to create not just personalized content, but personalized video, right? So if someone signs up for an account on your e-commerce site or any site for that matter, you can then send them a video that's tailored just to them specifically, right? Not one of 10, but just for them.
Yeah, you get
There's
super.
all kinds of stuff, especially
Yeah.
with personalization happening.
So like that, like the sales is so broad of a topic, but like inside the e-commerce world, it's like you're essentially saying like the entire supply chain is getting augmented by AI, and it's mostly positive. I think I was telling Elizabeth, but I know that like about a week ago, I introduced the company EverArt, which is going to be tracked by us pretty soon, which I thought was really kind of like, it's like powerful in a way that it's like, it's saying it's creating like your mood board. Like, so you put your product in and it can build like whole moods and styles around that. And it's like, as if I'm like a product owner that's selling on Shopify and Amazon and I want to keep my Instagram fresh, or I wanted to create mood boards around my product so I can put it in there. It's like, that is a profoundly powerful product to sort of like enable your sales team and your marketing team. And I when I first looked at EverArt, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I started looking at it more and I was like, no, this is really cool. Like this
No,
is,
that one is cool. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, so when you hear sales, I think you think of a salesperson, right? Like you're like, okay, how's it going to affect the salesperson? But it's like, no, the entire supply chain's getting changed. And so your all your writing, all your product, like your product, you have all your products in your spreadsheet or something like that, and you need to update it. I know, Shane, that you use GPT for work, right? By one of our partners. And you can imagine how tedious it is if you've got to update 1,000 products with new titles, you know what I mean? And now you can now you can do that. You can create new art. So it's like sales actually isn't just about the salesperson or the sales manager optimizing. It's like, how do you even get, like, how do you write
It's marketing too.
It's the whole thing. And
well, that's actually, so that just made me
go ahead.
think that I already have long believed that the distinction between different categories and fields of study is to a large degree very arbitrary, because ultimately they are all connected in different ways, even if it's a loose connection. And I kind of feel like, the more sophisticated that AI gets, I think we all agree teams are going to get smaller. At least and I think there'll be a lot more. There will be a lot more companies being started because you just need so many fewer resources to start them. But if you think about those things, I think what it is going to mean for a lot of people is that the lines between functions and departments and industries will start to get a lot more blurred, right? Where no longer is this thing that may have been the realm of marketing just marketing. Like your sales team is going to touch it also. Your finance team may touch it even. So the more of these systems we connect with, whether it's Make or a true, agentic workflow, I think those lines get blurred even more, and more of it gets put into the hands of a smaller and smaller team.
Yeah. So you're talking about, when I hear that, we used to talk about this a lot earlier in like 23, but like job compression, what I hear this is what sort of started us off on our AI journey. It's like, wow, AI is going to actually change the job space because, you might need fewer people to get stuff done. Whereas like in your team to make all the art and the mood boards, you might have had a small
like 5 people or whatever.
Yeah. And it's like, you might just be like, hey, guess what? We're using EverArt. We don't need 3 graphic designers anymore. We just need 1.
Yeah.
1 to manage it.
And you just go down the list.
It's like the journey, right? Like within sales, you have one step may be your CRM, right? The next step is like, okay, what do I do with all this information? It's like, well, I got to reach out to these people. And the next step is like, well, how am I monitoring the feedback that I'm getting? But if you go several steps back, it's like, well, there's another step in that journey, which is how do we take all this sales data and now inform a totally different department, whether it's finance or marketing. And so the more it gets compressed, I think just the more closely aligned those, different departments and roles are going to be.
You're also able to make decisions a lot faster, right? Like you used to get data about Facebook ads, right? And then in order to redo all the Facebook ads and all the text, you're like whiteboarding different. And so then by the time you release out this whole new set, you have to go get a photographer to take all new pictures. And so there's this huge gap between like, I don't know, maybe Taylor Swift did something and you want to throw up an ad and now it takes like 6 months to throw one up. It's like, you can do that immediately now.
So it's a perfect segue, Elizabeth, into my next sort of hypothetical question. As none of us will have the right answer, but we can certainly talk about it because I think everyone that's listening is trying to figure out how to get their game going in sales and using AI. But what's the difference, do you think, in a company that's like AI enabled native, meaning they started with all this, versus like I'm converting from an old system to a new system? Like what do you think? Like, do you think they'll outperform those newer will a newer company outperform an older company because they're just using this stuff natively, or is that just sort of like that's just a straw man and it's not? It's no, it's not.
I think it depends how they use their data. So I actually think that the older companies could have a better advantage if they take all of the data that they've had over the last 10, 15, however many years and use them to inform AI and build out their systems. I think they have a much better advantage than people, or even social media, like someone who's been, a social media manager for the last 10 years and has all this knowledge and expertise of like how it works. I think if they're able to take and implement some of this AI stuff, they're going to be at a better advantage than a new company trying to spin up a feature or tool, but don't really have the experience doing it manually.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I totally agree. But I think the advantage, the flip side of that is there's a lot of organizational inertia.
They move slow.
Existing companies,
Yeah.
and that can be one of the biggest challenges to making these changes. But you're totally right. If they're able to,
They're able
the
to, they have
data
way better
is
advantage.
so valuable, and that's why
Data wins.
I think that,
Yeah.
you know, the companies that'll be really successful in this new era, they start first and foremost with just really great data governance. And one of the problems with a lot of companies I you know that I am aware of is like all of the data is just, it's kept in so many different, you know, places with different teams, and it's siloed off, so
Yeah.
They're not even
it's
using
not
it.
being
Yeah.
it's not being used cohesively. Like the different divisions and teams are not able to work, you know, synergistically together because they're working with totally different systems with totally different data
Mhm.
sets, and there's not therefore a, you know, like a cohesive view of what's happening with the entire company. And the companies that are just starting up now, I think they know that. So from day one, they're building with that goal in mind, right?
Yeah.
Everything unified, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
nothing gets done unless you think first, how do we use AI to do this?
To
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
I think that's where I think you guys both made good points, but I feel like these AI native based businesses forget they don't. I'm not saying the company makes an AI to sell. They might sell, you know, ceramic coffee mugs, but if I think that the company that sort of says we're going to heavily, just almost what you said, Shane, like we're going to use our data. Like there are no silos, there are no walls, there are no political battles about getting, you know, something done on the roadmap. There is no backlog. That they're going to move and accelerate way faster than the others, and they will inherently run into those same big company problems with success, you know, maybe 5 years down the line. But I feel like they'll just inherently be like just set up better. And it's sort of like digital, like when I saw web companies, it's like Amazon, right? Amazon was like, hey, I'm going to build an electronic bookstore. It's like, and they
Yeah.
just decimated the world
Mhm.
because like everyone shifted to the web, right? I just feel like my you know, tea leaf reading is like, I would, if I'm a bigger company and I got my sales motion, I feel pretty good. I'm hitting my top line growth. I'm seeing, you know, seeing growth. My team's happy. My culture's good. I'd be worried. I'd be real worried because I have a feeling that there's going to be another company that if it's a good market, you're going to have a competitor. If you're in a crappy
Mhm.
market, you probably won't. Even a good market, there's going to be a younger company that's going to be like, look, the way that we're going to win is that a data game, an AI game,
Yep.
and we're going to crush
And
our
less
model.
funding, though. They're not going to need as much
They're not
funding.
going to
I
need
mean, I
as much
think that's a
funding.
Exactly. I think that's
huge.
why I think there's going to be a wave of, there will definitely be a, you know, large number of people playing an efficiency game where it's like, you know what, we can do the exact same thing they're doing with 10 times fewer people.
Yep.
So I guess my message, the reason why I brought up that question was like, I feel like our message to our listeners that are running a real companies, we know that some of our listeners are running real companies, and we've told them that they need to really think about how do you get your company to manage their top line growth, at the same time develop a new mindset of like, listen, we're going to have to be uncomfortable. We're going to have to adjust. You know what I mean? We know Salesforce has got Agentforce. We know there are these other companies coming out, but like, it's like, just because you release it doesn't mean you change, right? Your culture might
Hmm.
not change. And it's like, so I think our message to those companies is like, okay, like do what you need to do, but like know that there's going to be the native companies coming out that are like supercharged with an AI mindset and practice that's going to probably beat you because their margins are going to be different. You know what I mean? Like we've been reading, Elizabeth. I think we shared this article on 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 CoAI talking about how Klarna is actually reducing their top line their top line spend because they're reducing their headcount because they're using AI so significantly, and we're seeing other companies like Intuit and those other companies that are sort of adjusting. I think that like we're looking at, I think at a big shift coming. And this isn't the doom message. This is like get out, like get a team hired inside your organization. You know, certainly talk to guys, talk to us, but you know, but if you're not talking to us, talk to someone that can help you get there, because I think that doing nothing is actually a recipe for disaster. I mean, you know, is that too doomy, or is that or
No,
No,
I mean,
I
there's
agree.
no-
I mean, the bigger companies, if they can get their act together, they're in a really great position right now. If they can
right?
like pull it, especially for some of these tedious jobs like customer service, and that's expensive. It costs them a lot of money to have people doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Shane, you're about to say something.
I was gonna say there's a lot of doom in the market right now. You know, like Wall Street, especially a couple of weeks back, there was just a ton of talk about how all these big tech was investing billions and billions into AI that just wasn't paying off because there's no return. And my response is like, well, yeah, there's definitely froth in the market. There's no question about that. There's definitely companies that have valuations that are way higher than they should be. But I think that analysis is really largely missing the point. I mean, for one, a lot of these investments just happened, right? It takes time.
Yeah,
And a lot of people still don't understand how to get the value back from it. You know, like new models are coming out, it seems like every day now. And
Yeah.
I think we talk a lot about, well, which model is the most powerful, but we forget that even the models that get totally ignored are actually way more powerful than
yep,
we even know.
yep,
Right. And
hmm
that's because we haven't learned how to prompt them, how to plug them into our workflows. But we just assume like it's not good. But the reality is I think the workflows just haven't been designed around
Designed.
them well enough. Like the innovation is there, the capabilities are there. And there are teams out there who know that. And they're
yeah,
really making use of these tools and seeing huge, huge gains.
yeah. I mean,
Like they're gonna win big time, I think.
they're gonna win. Yeah, I agree. I know we're using them, and we're seeing our own personal like we're personally impressed, right? So like we wouldn't be talking about this, but I think that instead of talking about us, I actually think that the economists, our Wall Street friends, I don't think they have priced into their economic models the innovation and productivity they're going to get. So like I actually think that the smartest investors in the world, I think they should be investing more, and I think the smart ones are, because I think they know
I think
this is
they
a
are,
10-year
yeah.
race. You know what I mean? And they need to get money into the best things right now, because in 10 years, I think everything changes, right? I think we're 2024, 2034. I mean, I know that seems like, wow, a decade, but it's like, that's going to go by fast. And I think everything is going to be changed. I think the early bets are going to be, some are going to get wiped out, but most of them not. I actually think the behavior, the systems that are already ingrained right now, and the behavior is actually going to change drastically. I think you're going to see massive productivity. And I don't think the economists got a price into the model at all. I don't think they have the GDP actually seeing the impact of this. And
I think a lot of times people don't know what to use it for, and that's part of the problem.
yeah,
Like, even back to the larger companies, right? Like, they don't know what the use case is because they don't understand the models. And so I think some of it is they're not including it because they don't even know how to use it or
right.
what to use it
But
for.
the Klarner, they're seeing, the success of inbound automation on clearing inbound calls quicker, faster, and more effective, and the customer likes it, right? Like, that's just one data point. We're going to need to see more. You know what I mean? I will tell you, I do not like calling an airlines or any sort of like Spectrum or any of those companies, because I end up in a phone queue that was made in like the 80s. You know what I mean? But if I could get into a phone queue that's like made in 2024, where I'm like, hey, like why am I getting double charged right now on this? And it's like, they'd be like, oh yeah, like I'd be happy to talk to an
It'd be
AI
so much happier.
for
Yeah, I agree.
for a few minutes, and then
I
go,
prefer
okay,
it, yes.
yeah, route me out.
I'm not going to
But
be in a bad mood.
yeah, but so I'm pretty, obviously we're bullish, right? But we're also not like Pollyannish either. You know what I mean? We know how hard it is to make these things and make them work, and we know that they, like anybody you hire, they make mistakes. Like your AI is going to make mistakes, and I think that, like, I sort of scoff at people that say like, oh yeah, they're making mistakes. It's like, but doesn't your employee make mistakes too? Like, don't you make mistakes? Do you judge yourself as critically as an AI? What do you guys think about that when you hear those straw man arguments about AI hallucinating or making errors, or they're,
I mean, it's a
I still
good
think
point.
it's less on people. I mean, it's a good point, but I still think for some of this stuff,
It also
An
depends on what we're
aerosol.
talking about. If
Yeah.
if we're talking about, really sensitive patient healthcare data,
Yeah,
like
that's
obviously you can't tolerate the mistakes. But I think the right way to look at it is look, well, how many mistakes are the humans making and how many mistakes is AI making? That's more of the comparison. Um, same with finance. I know a lot of folks who work at investment banks, private equity shops, and they're also dealing with very sensitive information. And every single number, they have to get right. So like
Mhm.
a hallucination is just not going to be
yeah.
tolerated. Um, Customer service, I mean, it's a little more fuzzy to me. You can measure conversions, you can measure, you have ways to measure whether a conversation was successful. But I think there's a little bit wider of a margin,
Yep.
of error for it.
Mhm.
Yep.
I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's funny is like, we wouldn't call this AI, but autopilot on most commercial airliners fly planes all day long.
Yeah.
Like they got to get it right too. So there are ways to get like, computational systems to get it right. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, and you introduce agents into the equation, and then it's like, the problem just gets even more complicated because now it's like you've got multiple different applications or endpoints or nodes in the workflow that you've got to monitor, and that is a really tough problem. And I think it's a really scary proposition for people to say, okay, you just go off on your own and do this task for me. But if it has anything to do with any sort of payment, it's like, well, number one, make sure you're not going to just like drain my bank account, or
Yeah.
send the money to the wrong person. You're giving an agent, something that's truly an agent that can act autonomously, has an enormous amount of power. So I think a hallucination there is way more
Yeah.
scary than a
Agree.
hallucination when you're in something like a chat system.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I
I agree.
think Wall Street's been ahead of most of companies in that, where the derivative trading and high frequency trading through algorithmic trading has been in place for quite a long time, and we've seen some serious stock drops on a race condition. The race condition would actually say sell, but I think that they're not immune to it, but we've seen them adjust and fix, and I believe that we're going to see, as we move to a more agent based, AI driven sales architecture that I think we're all forecasting is going to happen. We will see these bumps in the road. But I think
I mean, there's a training process of
yeah,
the whole thing too. Just like you hire a new person and you gotta like train them. I mean, there is a training aspect, I think,
yeah,
to all the agents
I
too.
mean, we'll have new mistakes, right? Like we'll have new mistakes in our workflows, but I think the good will far outweigh the bad. And we talked about like using EverArt and all the other Gen AI creation tools. You have all of your text generation tools that are going to change sales. We have all of our video and audio systems that are going to change the workflow and sales. So I think that for our first podcast sort of dedicated to sales, we've talked about a lot. We've talked a lot about things that are coming. Elizabeth, like we have some of these actually working with customers that you've talked to and touched. Like they're largely happy with the small cases that they
Yeah.
have, right? It's
Yeah.
working for them, right? And so like we
I
have
mean, I
real
think the
evidence.
other thing to point on just really quick too is the innovation. So a lot of times there is some cool technology being developed in the universities, and the barrier to entry to get it to market used to be so large that a lot of this technology just kind of died. Like these innovations didn't come out. So I think we're going to see more innovations just actually get to market from the barrier to entries being
Yeah.
smaller.
Yeah, things are going to come faster for us. And so I mean, like as we wrap up here, we're recommending companies that are listening, that are curious, to actually come to CoAI. The URL's get CoAI. It'll be in the description. Check out, we have a whole top 10 list on the top 10 sales companies that we're tracking. We have a leaderboard. We have Elizabeth that's not an AI. She's a really smart human that you can talk to. And if you want to, talk about this, we might the call might go from 15 minutes to 45, but you'll get so much out of it. You know, we recommend that you actually spend time with us or with people that are using this stuff, but we'd be happy to talk to you guys directly. You can reach out to us on all our social networks. We're on, our handle is GetCoAI. So we're on LinkedIn a lot. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. You might be listening to this on YouTube. You can leave us a comment. You can mail us. We're easy. We're so easy to find, and we actually want to encourage you guys to talk to us because I think that we'll learn a lot, and hopefully you'll learn a lot. But more importantly, I think getting that AI, we call it literacy or mindset. Like we really think you as a company need to kind of get there, and we could certainly help. But you might have already gotten there, and you want to talk to us on our podcast. Like that's another way of kind of doing it, because we really believe that there's not enough people that are sort of focused right now on, you know, AI. Lots of people focus on AI, but like getting down into sales, getting down in like what sales and agents are going to mean. Like we want to have this conversation with you. So that's my sort of parting salutation. I want Shane, if you got something, Elizabeth, you got something. Let's
that was
drop
great.
it.
You summed it up.
If you're managing your outreach in a spreadsheet, definitely contact us because
yes.
you're leaving money on the table. There's a lot of low hanging fruit that's really not that difficult to learn. It just takes a little bit of time getting to know the system and what's out there, and we'd be happy to help you with that.
That's great.
I think even if you're like, I have absolutely no idea what to start, that's a good reason to reach out to. Yep. You know, if you're a mid-size or even a larger company and you're like, I don't know how to implement this, you know, we can help find some use cases to start with.
That's great. Right on. Well, you know, check our top 10 list. We're tracking them. We're going to be also releasing a pretty comprehensive sector analysis on everything that's being covered in what we call sales. Even though we know sales kind of touches everything in a company, we're pretty focused on that. And if you're an AI company that's listening to this, because we know that there's a lot of AI makers that listen to us, you know, we would love to sort of cover you in this sector report. If you want to give us a briefing, that would be great too. And then you can we can get you tracked in our top 10. Our top 10 is really, there's more than that, but we've got a top 10, but I think there's hundreds of companies in there. So stay tuned. Elizabeth, great to have you on the podcast. We know we're going to have you back. You were great. And Shane as well. We'll wrap it here then.